Most people think heart attacks announce themselves with dramatic chest pain or a sudden collapse that looks like a movie scene, but the reality is far more terrifying. After the age of 60, the most dangerous cardiac events are the ones that build in complete silence while you are fast asleep and unconscious. There is no warning, no time to call for help, and often no second chance, because these events are triggered by ordinary habits you perform every single night before turning off the light. As a cardiac specialist, I have spent decades opening chests and repairing arteries, and I have seen the same preventable patterns repeat themselves in patients who had no idea they were loading a gun against their own hearts. Tonight, I am going to reveal exactly what those patterns are and how you can unload that gun one simple evening at a time to ensure your heart keeps beating through the quietest hours of the night. What you learn in the next few minutes might be the most critical information you receive this year, because the hours between midnight and 6 in the morning carry the highest risk of heart failure and stroke. Your cardiovascular system does not take a vacation when you fall asleep. Instead, it is supposed to shift into a biological reset where your blood pressure naturally dips and your arteries relax. In a healthy body, this nighttime dip is a form of maintenance that allows the heart to recover from the stress of the day. But as we age, this system becomes far less reliable. The blood vessels begin to stiffen, the pressure regulation becomes less precise, and the hormonal signals that once protected your heart start to weaken significantly. This means your margin for error gets much smaller, because while you are awake, your body has backup mechanisms to compensate for stress. But at night, those mechanisms go offline. Your body is essentially running on a skeleton crew during those quiet hours when no one is watching, but your habits are still active. What happens during these dangerous hours is determined almost entirely by the decisions you made right before you closed your eyes, such as the meal you ate or the pills you took. The first mistake that shocks my patients the most is the timing of their evening meal, because eating a heavy, dense dinner too close to bedtime creates a massive cardiovascular emergency. When you consume a large portion of fats or carbohydrates late at night, your digestive system demands an enormous increase in blood flow to break down that food. Your heart is forced to pump harder at a time when it should be winding down, and your triglycerides spike sharply within hours of your first bite. This creates a direct conflict in your body. Your heart is working overtime to digest your dinner while simultaneously trying to enter its recovery mode. In a person over 60, this conflict leads to elevated nighttime blood pressure and a higher risk of cardiac events during sleep. The fix is simple. You must finish your main meal by 7 in the evening to give your heart a full 3 to 4 hours to settle into a peaceful state before you lie down. Another critical factor that many people overlook is the timing of their blood pressure medication, which can be the difference between life and death during the early morning hours. Most people take their medication in the morning, but for many older adults, blood pressure does not dip at night as it should. Instead, it surges in a dangerous condition called nocturnal hypertension. While you sleep, your arterial walls are not braced for impact, and a pressure surge at 3 in the morning hits your vessels much harder than it would during the afternoon. This surge is significantly more likely to rupture a vulnerable plaque or trigger a clot if your medication has worn off by the time you need it most. You must speak to your doctor about evening dosing, because research shows that taking your blood pressure medication at night can dramatically reduce your cardiovascular risk. Timing is everything in cardiology, and leaving yourself unprotected during the night is a risk you simply cannot afford to take. I want you to think carefully about whether you or your partner snores, because that irregular rumbling is not just an annoyance, it is a major cardiac warning sign that demands immediate attention. Sleep apnea is one of the most underdiagnosed conditions in older adults. and it essentially means you are stopping your breathing dozens of times every single hour while you sleep. Every time your breathing stops, your oxygen levels drop, and your brain fires off a stress response that jolts your heart with adrenaline and cortisol. Your heart is being forced to wake up in a state of panic, while the rest of your body is trying to rest, leading to a 3 times higher risk of a heart attack. This constant cycle of suffocation and adrenaline accelerates the thickening of your arterial walls and triggers irregular heart rhythms like atrial fibrillation. If you wake up with headaches, a dry mouth, or feel exhausted even after a full night of sleep, you must get evaluated for sleep apnea immediately to protect your heart. A very common mistake driven by logic is deliberately limiting how much you drink in the evening to avoid making frequent trips to the bathroom throughout the night. While it makes sense to want uninterrupted sleep, going to bed even mildly dehydrated causes your blood to become more viscous and thick, like cold syrup moving through a straw. Thick blood does not flow freely through narrowed arteries, and when your heart rate naturally slows down during sleep, this sludge-like blood is far more prone to forming dangerous clots. This combination of slow circulation and thicker blood is one of the primary reasons why strokes and heart attacks cluster in the early morning hours before dawn. You do not have to choose between a dry bed and a healthy heart. Drinking just 8 ounces of room temperature water before bed ensures your blood stays fluid. This small amount of hydration acts as a natural lubricant for your vascular system, preventing the dangerous thickening that leads to nighttime cardiovascular disasters. Many people are surprised to learn that the temperature of their bedroom plays a vital role in how hard their heart has to work during the night. If your room is too warm, your blood vessels dilate and your heart rate stays elevated as your body struggles to dissipate heat, which leads to fluid loss and further dehydration. On the other hand, a bedroom that is too cold causes your blood vessels to tighten or constrict to preserve core heat, which forces your blood pressure to rise as your heart fights against more resistance. There is a specific optimal range between 18 and 22 degrees Celsius that allows your heart rate to stay low and steady while your vessels remain relaxed. This thermal neutrality ensures that you spend more time in deep restorative sleep where your heart performs its best overnight recovery. Adjusting your thermostat is one of the easiest ways to provide real protection for your arteries without needing any special equipment or expensive medical treatments. When we look at these habits together, we can build a blueprint for a heart-safe evening routine that addresses every single risk factor without making dramatic changes to your life. Your main meal should be finished by 7 in the evening, focusing on lean proteins and vegetables rather than heavy fats that clog your system. At 7 o'clock, you should take your medications and drink your dedicated glass of water to ensure your blood remains thin and your pressure stays regulated. Between 8 and 9, you need a wind-down period involving a gentle walk or calm conversation to step away from bright screens that keep your nervous system in an alert state. By 9 o'clock, you should adjust your room temperature and set your water on the nightstand so that everything is ready for a safe night of rest. Finally, if you are a snorer, make the effort to sleep on your side rather than your back to prevent your airway from collapsing while you wait for a formal medical evaluation. There is an additional silent crisis that happens when we ignore the warning signals our legs and feet send us in the hours before we go to sleep. If you experience swelling in your ankles or a heavy aching sensation in your calves, your body is telling you that your circulation is already struggling to fight gravity. When you lie flat, the blood that has pooled in your lower extremities suddenly rushes back toward your heart, creating a volume overload that can strain a weak cardiac muscle. Elevating your legs for 20 minutes before bed or using a small pillow under your ankles can help drain this fluid safely and reduce the workload on your heart as you transition to sleep. Most people brush off these symptoms as simple tiredness or a sign of aging, but they are actually early indicators of vascular stiffness that will eventually lead to a crisis. Taking control of your circulation means listening to these subtle cues and making small adjustments to your positioning to ensure your heart is not overwhelmed the moment you close your eyes. I have stood at operating tables at 3 in the morning, holding hearts that stopped because of a clot that formed overnight in a narrowed artery that should have been protected. I have had to speak to devastated families in waiting rooms at dawn who had no idea anything was wrong when they said their goodnights just a few hours earlier. In almost every case, the contributing factors were not exotic or rare. They were a late dinner, a skipped medication, a bedroom that was too warm, or an airway that had been collapsing for years. These are the background noises of millions of ordinary evenings that accumulate night after night until they become a cardiac event that nobody saw coming. Most of the hearts I have had to repair did not fail because of bad luck. They failed because the patients simply did not have the information necessary to protect themselves. Now that you have this information, the question is what you will do with it tonight to ensure your heart stays healthy for years to come. To protect yourself starting tonight, you must commit to a clear action plan that turns these scientific facts into daily habits that guard your life. Finish your dinner early, drink your water, and have that critical conversation with your doctor about the timing of your blood pressure medication to ensure you are covered during the early morning surge. If you have been told you stop breathing, or if you wake up gasping, do not treat it as a joke. Treat it as a cardiac emergency that requires a professional sleep study and proper treatment. Keep your bedroom cool to allow your vessels to relax, and do not let your blood thicken because you are afraid of a midnight trip to the bathroom. These are not just health tips. They are the fundamental pillars of cardiovascular survival for anyone over 60 who wants to avoid becoming another statistic in the emergency room. Your heart has worked for you every single minute of your life, and it is time you gave it the conditions it needs to keep going. Take a moment to look at your own routine and honestly identify which of these 5 deadly habits you are currently practicing before you go to bed. Most people will recognize at least 2 or 3 of these patterns in their own lives, but the difference now is that you have the knowledge to change your destiny. Share this information with someone you love, because there is likely a spouse, a sibling, or a friend who is making these same mistakes every night without knowing the danger. Your mobility and your very life depend on the quality of your circulation and the strength of your heart during those 8 hours of darkness. Do not wait for a warning sign that might never come, and do not wait for your next checkup to start taking these small but life-saving steps. Take care of your heart tonight. Sleep well, knowing you are protected, and I look forward to seeing you healthy and vibrant for many more years to come.